people who take God at His word. On Wednesday, we had an awesome time at the Jesus Dinner. So awesome what God is doing and how He moves through the body. It was beautiful. And one of the stories that came up was the story of Joshua and Caleb and going in to spy out the promised land. So I'm not going to actually read the story, but just kind of give you the synopsis again. So Moses and Israel, they're about to go and inhabit the promised land. They're on the edge of it, and they send 12 people in, 12 people in to actually go out and spy out the land. All right, so these 12 people go in, they spy out the land, they take a look, and they come back and they give their report. Now, for 10 of the people, they came back, and the first thing they said was, wow, there's giants in the land, they're too big for us. Actually, there's one part that says that we seemed like grasshoppers compared to them in our own eyes. So to us, we seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes. And for 2 of them, Joshua and Caleb, all they could talk about was the fruit in the land. They're like, man, it's flowing with milk and honey, it's huge, the grain is awesome, and all this stuff, and God has given it to us. And I think as Christians, what we focus on is so vital to our walk, what we look at. And so many of us, I think when God calls us to do something, the first thing we look at isn't the fruit and the opportunity and what God could do through that. What we look at are the risks, the giants, all these things that could go wrong, all the what ifs in the land. And at the end of all this, God said, okay, well, you guys aren't going into the promised land now because you guys were chicken. And even though I promised it to you, it's called the promised land. Okay, can we acknowledge that? It's promised by God Himself. The promised land that I've called you into. But you guys are not going in. The only people that are going to go in are Joshua and Caleb. It says, because they believed me wholeheartedly. They trusted me. They believed me wholeheartedly. When I said that this is yours, they believed me wholeheartedly. As believers, what we look at, who we believe, what report we believe is so vital. Because if we look at the obstacles, if we look at all the things that are in our way, I don't think we would take on much. And you know the story of Peter walking on water. That's a classic one. When you look at the waves and take your eyes off of Jesus, that's when we sink. That's when things happen. We are doing, as a church, we're doing things that are technically impossible. We're walking on water. Get used to it. We're doing really hard things, and God is calling us beyond ourselves. And I've said this before, if we're dreaming dreams that are small enough for us to do on our own, they're not big enough. They're just not big enough. If you can accomplish it on your own, then what do you need God for? We need to be dreaming dreams in line with God's dream for our lives, not just the little dreams that we can accomplish on our own. And that's what requires trust. Because again, doing something that you can do already doesn't require any trust. It doesn't require you to step out and actually do anything. So I guess, discussion question for us, and I want you guys to participate because I think it's so important to actually hear from the body and hear what each other are going through. It's so encouraging. And just speak up because I'm sure there's somebody in the room that's going through something similar. So what I want to talk about is, what are we looking at? What's one of the things that's distracting us from achieving what God has called us to? Anything in our lives. What's something that's a distraction? Something that we're looking at instead of Jesus, instead of the fruit, instead of what He's calling us to do? Are there any things that you can think of in your own life as an example? Go ahead, sir. Work. Okay, yeah.
Finances.
Finances, yeah. Finances, yeah, that's good.
Just busyness, when things sort of come at me that, then I have to work out which ones are the things I'm supposed to do. Too much stuff sometimes.
Right.
Do it all.
Yeah, busyness, that's good.
Doubt and fear.
Yeah, awesome. Perfectionism, yeah. That's awesome. Actually, I want to camp out there because God's been teaching me a lot about that. that. Actually, a story that Trevor was telling me when we were hanging out over coffee one time. He was talking about how he was doing these drawings with adults, and I might butcher the story, so you might need to tell it anyway. But he would do these prophetic drawings with kids and adults. And so what it is you just wait on the Lord, and then you draw something that you think, is for the other person. Really, really simple thing. And the difference between adults and kids was that every time an adult would do it, before they showed their picture, there'd be giggling and, don't laugh, I'm not an artist, blah, 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 all these different things. And then they would show their picture. It would be kind of this nervous thing. With kids, they didn't care at all. Here it is. This is my picture. This is the best I can do, and Daddy hangs it up on his fridge and all that type of stuff. And I think when God calls us to come to him like a child, I think it's with that, like, Daddy, here's my best. This is it. This is it. And really just walking in that and not being ashamed of putting it out there. Even for me, God's been calling me for a while to write a book. And I've just had all these kind of doubts and things attacking me, and perfectionism. I just want it to be really good, and I want people to actually read it and whatever. But all these doubts about who are you to write a book and all this little stuff that comes into your head. But then God just keeps speaking to me like, no, just give me what you've got. Just draw your picture like a 5-year-old, and I'm going to hang it up on my fridge. If nobody else reads it, I'm going to read it. So but just having that childlike attitude that this is for Daddy. That's it. There's only one. It's an audience of one. That's it. It's not about anybody else. And I think we're, again, just so afraid of the fear of judgment, and what people think. And perfectionism, I think, comes from that fear. It really stems from that fear of judgment. But I want to be a kid that just puts it out there for my dad. Who cares? He'll hang it up on his fridge. That's the kind of kid I want to be. So. Anyway, any other things that are distracting us from our walk?
Media.
Media.
We're bombarded constantly from different kinds of media all day long.
Yeah, media, which I think kind of goes into the busyness and stuff as well, and just a lack of focus in general. Are we really, as the story with Mary and Martha, are we really doing the one thing that matters and sitting at Jesus' feet?
So many conflicting messages from the media. That's part of that. Not just distraction.
Yeah, conflicting messages. Yeah, about the type of life that we're supposed to want, which really doesn't line up with the Bible at all and what Jesus says matters, and so you wonder why we're discontent, Yeah, it's good. Anything else?
Abiding in his word. Sometimes we get distracted and invite in everything else, even our friends, which are good, or, something that's really good for us. But it's knowing balance and abiding in his word. If we did that, he would direct our path.
Yeah. That's awesome.
How about just plain laziness?
Yeah. Straight up, bro. That's it. It is. Well, and I think, anyway, we're going to be digging into this a little bit more, but just the apathy that comes from laziness and from disengaging life. I think you're absolutely right. You're going to say.
Discouragement. I'm never going to get through this.
Right. Yeah.
Discourage yourselves with your own words.
Right. Yeah. Discouragement, and even self-defeating talk. That's so true. That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Not living up to what you perceive as your own expectations. They may be acceptable by everyone, but you never give yourself the credit for doing what is right and doing what God calls you to do. You may be doing it, but you don't give yourself credit for it.
Right. Well, and I think that even comes back to what I was talking about just now is, who's your audience? Is it you and your own expectations that you're trying to live up to, which are probably from media and a bunch of other weird sources anyway? Is it people that you're trying to please, or is it actually God? Because if you please God, it really doesn't matter who you displease. And if you displease God, it really doesn't matter who you please. So, yeah, does that make sense? Yes. Yeah. It's true, though. It's true. It doesn't matter. It's awesome. Okay, great thoughts. So we're gonna keep it moving. We're gonna spend a little bit more time.
Oh man, trying to hold it together, but he's good. All right.
So next section I want to talk about is just being people who engage life. So the first one was talking about people who take God at His word and actually believe Him. Even actually coming back to that, faith, we talk about faith as if it's believing in God, right? Faith is believing in God, whatever. I think faith is much deeper than that. I think faith is believing God.
Yeah.
And that's different than believing in God. Faith kind of takes for granted that God actually exists already. No, He exists. Like, we don't have to believe in Him. He exists. Faith is believing Him. Taking that to the next level. Not believing in Him, it's believing Him and trusting that He loves you and, walking in that. So, anyway, now we're talking about being people who engage life. I was really struck by this scripture in Revelation. It's in Revelation 21, starting at verse 8. Really interesting. I'll just read it and then I'll unpack it a little bit. All right. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. Pretty heavy scripture. But what was interesting to me wasn't, all the stuff about just, this is, the fiery lake or whatever. That's not what I'm focusing on right now. What I'm focusing on right now is this interesting list that Jesus gives us here. The cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, sexually immoral, people who practice magic arts, idolaters, and all liars. He put cowardly and unbelieving at the top of a list of things along with murderers, idolaters, liars, all this stuff, the cowardly and the unbelieving. And for me, when I read this scripture, I'm like, oh my goodness. Like, I haven't killed anybody, that's pretty good. I was going to say but that's terrible. Filters. I don't plan ever. Jesus help me. But he lists the cowardly, the unbelieving, with murderers, vile, sexually immoral, and all of these different things. God doesn't take lightly to cowardice. So when we're talking about engaging life and being afraid to live the life that God calls us to, He lumps that up there with some pretty heavy stuff. And I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about for me. This is convicting me in my own life. Like, what in the world am I living so afraid of? Cowardly and the unbelieving. Come on. I feel like as Christians, we live in this state of, I was actually talking to Diane about this recently, like, we live as if we're at a red light all the time. Okay, so we're at a red light and we're waiting for God to turn green. And the sick part is that for me, I even justify it by saying, I'm waiting on the Lord. Let me pray about it again. Well, you already done prayed about it. He told you what to do, now go do it. And for me, I justify it sometimes by saying, I need to wait on the Lord. I need to, all this stuff. And so I feel like we live it as if we're always at a red light waiting for God to turn it green, some magical sign and some whatever. I was hearing this pastor talk this one time at a conference in San Diego, and it was a missions conference. So he was like, everybody in here is a bunch of young people and, kind of teenager, young adult age. And he's like, most of you, the problem is you're all waiting for an Ethiopia-shaped cloud, to come into the sky, and that's your sign. God's going to give you a nation. He's going to send you to a nation. But God doesn't often do that, and He doesn't need to. Like, if we stepped out and actually did something that was in line with His heart, do you think Daddy would be like, hey, I didn't tell you to go to Ethiopia and feed kids? Or like, no! But we're all waiting for this Ethiopia-shaped cloud. We're living at a red light, waiting for God to turn it green all the time. But I feel like we actually should have this green light mentality and trust that God is big enough to stop us. Green light, trust that God can turn it red. Not red light, hoping that He one day turns it green, because it's never going to be green enough for you. You're like, yeah, that's kind of teal. It's never going to be green enough for you. It's a green light mentality. And trust that God is big enough to stop you and redirect you. I think of an image of a ship. And a ship, when it's in port, big ship, it takes like a bunch of huge dudes with chains to turn a ship when it's in port. All right, you're looking at a parked ship. They have these chains, and if they want to turn it even like this much, they are a bunch of dudes on these big chains trying to yank at this thing. When a ship is going, what does it take to turn it? A rudder. Tiny little, okay. You know, God can redirect you if you're moving. So move. Do something. Trust that he'll redirect you. Again, we're just sitting here waiting for God to speak something all the time. I'm going to read another interesting story, and it's of the shrewd manager, the parable of the shrewd manager. And these are Jesus' words, and struck me as very interesting recently. Where are we going here? So we're going to Luke, if you want to join me, Luke 16. Really interesting story. All right, so this is Jesus' story, starting at verse 1. Jesus told his disciples, there was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you can no longer be my manager any longer. The manager said to himself, what shall I do now? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, so that when I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their houses. So he called in each of the master's debtors, so people that owed the master money. He asked the first, how much do you owe my master? 800 gallons of olive oil, he replied. The manager told him, take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 400. Then he asked the second, and how much do you owe? 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. So I was asking Jesus about this story, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Really, what is going on here? There's a dishonest man who's pulling some shady stuff, and you're talking about, this is Jesus' parable, so obviously he means something by it. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. I was reading a book recently called The Ragamuffin Gospel. Brilliant book. If you guys ever check it out, by Brendan Manning. So good. Just hits at the heart of the gospel in such a simple way. So I'm reading the Ragamuffin Gospel, and he actually broke this down, and he was talking about how Jesus wasn't talking about the morality of what the manager did. He wasn't saying being dishonest is a good thing. What he was saying is that he was commended because he acted. He did something. And in here, and again, I'm not telling you to do shady stuff, but what it tells me anyway is that Jesus puts more value on doing something than he does on getting it right. He puts more value on you acting and doing something than getting it totally right and nailing it and having it be perfect, you know? There's way more value on doing something. And again, as Christians, I think we're just kind of handicapped by this, okay, well, I don't really know, and I'm not equipped enough, and da-da-da-da-da. If the Lord's calling you to it, he will call you through it. If he's calling you to it, he's going to equip you for it. He equips the called. He doesn't call the equipped. He doesn't call people that have it together. I have no clue what I'm doing in life. Okay. He doesn't call me because I'm equipped. He equips me as he calls me into things, and doors just open and things just happen. It's ridiculous. I'm not equipped without it. So again, green light mentality, always a go, and let Jesus stop you. So I really just wanted to talk about and start to expose, because it says when you bring things to the light, that's where they're dealt with. And so I just wanted to start to expose what are some of the fears that are holding us back and keeping us passive, you know, because that's what it is. It's usually some sort of fear, some sort of whatever that's keeping us in an inactive state. And I'll start. I'll give an example of this past week. Oh no, week before. I was sitting down with just this great businessman, and he was asking me about good coffee and how things are going and where things need to go. So I said, well, really what we need to do with good coffee, where things need to go, is we need to land a couple bigger clients. That's what we need. We need to land a couple bigger clients so that this thing actually starts moving. We've landed a few small ones. We need to land some bigger clients. So I said, okay, well, what's holding you back? And so I start listing, and then we're focused on this, and all these really, really great business answers, you know? And he said, okay, what are you afraid of? What's actually stopping you? What's kind of the hungry ghost, he calls it, what's the hungry ghost that you're trying to feed? What's inside of you that is actually stopping you from going out there? And as we started digging, it was a much longer conversation than this, but as we started digging, I realized that what was actually under it was a deep fear that I don't have what it takes. That's why, because really, our lack of priorities and stuff, we talk about priorities and being too busy, what it really comes down to is something underneath it. A belief that you have about yourself, an idea that you have about yourself or about God that's actually steering you in that direction. So it wasn't just that I wasn't prioritizing going after these big clients. I was able to make a whole bunch of excuses because I was terrified. I was terrified of putting it out there and being exposed as some sort of phony or something. Like just putting it out there and not having what it takes in the big world, of business. And so as I broke through that, this last week has been awesome because I just feel like I have nothing to lose. I'm like, wait a minute, if I'm not afraid of the results, if the results aren't up to me, and it really doesn't matter what I actually have because it matters what God brings to the table, and my part is obedience. So I've been going into some pretty big meetings with some big fish and having a lot of fun because I have nothing to lose. And some things might actually be going somewhere. It's pretty neat, actually, But again, it was this fear underneath that was keeping me passive, keeping me inactive, but behind it was, hey, I don't know if I have what it takes. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And that was the fear behind it. So I guess, a question for discussion is, what fear or fears are holding you back? And again, just for the benefit of the group, I bet you there's somebody in here that's feeling some of the same way. So please, and let's just put it into the light, because that's all I did. I put it into the light and I gave it to Jesus, and I'm like, oh, that's stupid. And then, and then I moved forward and started not being a coward. It was pretty simple when you put it in the light. So let's put some things in the light. What's going on? What's holding you back? What are you afraid of?
Maybe fear of missing out on something better. If you commit to one thing, then you miss out on something else.
That's good. Yeah.
Fear of judgment of others.
Yeah, fear of judgment, for sure.
I think at some level, we all have a fear of being vulnerable. Just real honest.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and even just touching on that one, that's actually been the big breakthrough for a lot of these meetings for me, is that I sit down and I don't pretend like I have it all together. I actually say, hey, this is what we're struggling with, and whatever. And it's like the opposite response. I was so terrified of going into these meetings and being like, hey, there's a lot I still need to figure out, because then, oh yeah, I know he doesn't know what he's doing, and you kind of brush him off. It's the opposite result that's happening. People are coming to me and saying, oh, I have a connection, I have a this, I can help you with that, and all these different things. It's a totally different response. So yeah, vulnerability is just huge. Just be real. Just be real. Especially in the church. Come on, guys, be real. With each other. This is the best.
Isn't that the hardest place to be real sometimes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. I think it is.
It creates a whole new level of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
That's where God really works powerful.
Yeah, it's true.
Justin, I think for me, it's been that I've been too busy carrying too much baggage. I mean, it's really hard to go forward when you're carrying all this crap with you, like unforgiveness and bitterness and anger, and it's just like, deal with your crap, get rid of it so that you can then move forward and do what God's called you to do.
Yeah, that's so good. Thanks.
I think for me, I realized lately it's that fear of actually looking on the inside and finding all those things that you're gonna find, like inadequacy, unforgiveness, bitterness, and trusting that God can deal with it, right? So it's that fear of like, well, I'm just gonna be this shell and not allow anybody to penetrate, not even myself. But then once you allow that shell to be penetrated and you actually look inside and allow God to bring up those nasties, I like to call them, and you realize that, I am completely inadequate and I am completely vulnerable, but hey, this is great because now God can supernaturally do what he longs to do in me and through me. So, working through that.
Yeah, weakness is power, guys.
Yeah,
it's not
it's
just
power.
Because God's power is made perfect in our weakness, and so Paul says he would boast about his weaknesses, and I'm seeing it. I'm telling you, I saw it happen this last week. Just being weak in front of people and boasting about it in a way, like, you know, this is where it is. God's power shows up and is made perfect in our weakness. So actually being weak is the way forward, being totally dependent on Christ. You know, that's so good. So good. Anybody else? Yeah.
I think too, like in line with judgment and sort of man's fear of rejection.
Yeah. Fear of rejection, yeah.
Like, I mean, if you go out on a limb and you're looking directly at Jesus, but people reject you, that's hard. That's hard for us to take as people, okay? So that goes right to you.
Totally, yeah. So just fear of rejection, and I think especially people that are close to you, you know, because you have somebody on the street or whatever rejected you for whatever reason, it doesn't mean as much as somebody in your circle, you know, or whatever it is. That hurts a lot more. That hurts a lot more. So, yeah, that's good. Thank you. Anything else? Yeah, please.
I think that I can relate to what you were saying about baggage. I think that for me, it also really comes down to how I see God, based on certain relationships I've had, family members and things like that. And help letting him fix that, which isn't fun.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think there's the fear of the Lord, which is this healthy knowledge or acknowledgement of his awesomeness and how huge he is. But then I think there's an unhealthy fear of the Lord that sometimes comes through human relationships. I think especially father relationships is a tough one for people, is however they saw their dad, they usually see in God. So if their dad was, kind of abrasive and perfectionist or whatever it was, they perceive God in that same light. And so I think, there's an unhealthy fear of daddy, who just loves us so much. And
So that it makes him seem less loving.
Right.
Like, well,
yeah, because you're
wanna take care of me?
projecting on him like what your experiences are, when he's not like that at all. He's so merciful and so loving. Yeah, that's good. That's really good. Thank you. Anybody else before we? Yeah.
I've been concentrate on renewing my mind and reading about that. I've learned that a person really has to think about what they're thinking about.
Right. That's good. I'm going to say that as a mic. You say that a person really has to think about what they're thinking about. That's so good.
So
So good.
it's consistent with what God's word says. Because I know that's led me down a lot of wrong road. As a man thinks, he becomes what he thinks about. And there's always a thought before an action. And it isn't easy because you have all those old habits, old ways of thinking. And sometimes it gets frustrating, you want to give up. Nobody ever got nothing to give up.
That's true.
And so it's an ongoing process, and I guess mostly for life.
Wow, that's awesome. Thank you.
Some days are better than others.
Yeah. Thank you. That's awesome. Well, any last thoughts before we go into some more worship? Yeah.
I'm actually writing a book too.
Cool.
But for the last year and a bit, I've been going through this horrible grief with my husband. And I've just seen how society reacts to you, and how people don't know what to say, don't know what to do, don't know. Everybody wants to be kind and help, but really, truly, we as a society don't know how to deal with them. And so I've been writing my book, and for one, about the amazing man that he was, but also how I'm dealing with it, how I'm going through it, whatever, and I want to reach out to people and help them with it, and help other people know how to deal with somebody who's grieving, and how to be gentle and all that kind of stuff. And you said earlier, who do you think you are writing this book? I was like, that's what stops me. Because I have it, I'm writing it, and I'm going, and it's like, it's pretty good. And I'm like, and then I'll go for days and I don't touch it. And it's that fear of, who do you think you are? Like, what do you have to offer? What, And I was at a seminar yesterday, and Another woman stood up and she said she had some kind of ideas or whatever on the guy running the seminar. He says, you know, give me a deadline and he says, I'll read your book and I'll send it to my publisher. And I'm like, I just need a deadline. You know, so, yeah, but it is. It's all that feel, all that, you know, am I good enough? Can I, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good. And just such an attack again. I mean, it's so garbage. You know, like it's such a lie. That's what it is. It's a lie. Because it actually, it's like not even the right question. Do I have what it takes? Because we don't. That's like, so it doesn't even matter. That's not the right question. Is God calling me to this? And yeah, and is He big enough? And the answers are yes and yes. You know, so write it. That's awesome. Thank you. Thanks for being vulnerable. That's awesome.
You know, if God is calling us to do it, like you said, He gives us the green light. So we've got to move into the red light, and we've got to listen to Him.
Yeah, it's awesome. And it's not just you missing out, right? It's the people that are going to be reading your book. That's really what it's about, is who God's reaching through what you're writing. You know, so it's bigger than you, and that's been the one thought that has unlocked me whenever I do have moments of writing. It's like, no, this actually isn't about me anyway. You know, and then it kind of takes the pressure off. You know? It's not about me, and God's doing it anyway, so I just do my best. Yeah.
Obviously, I really needed to hear that, because the guy yesterday said that too. It's not about you.
That's awesome.
Not about me, what?
Yeah. What do you mean? It's my book. Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, well, let's go into a little bit more worship here, and then we'll wrap it up and grab some snacks after and hang out with each other. So let's go.
12 after 12.
12 after 12? No, yeah. Okay. Well, we'll boogie on through this one. All right. So the last bit. So we talked about being people who take God at His word. We were talking about being people who actually engage with life and start doing things. And then the third one is just being people who use what we have. So we're going to be talking about a well-known story from Matthew 25, talking about the talents. And I just want to point out a few things that the Lord's been working on me with. So if you want to go to Matthew 25, it's always fun to read along. Okay, starting at 14. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received the 5 talents brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with the 2 talents also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I have gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew that you are a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and hid your talent in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well then, you should have put the money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would have received it back with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Again, a little bit heavy. We hear the story of the talents, and we're like, oh man, that guy at the end, the 1 talent guy, he really should have done something with his talent. You know, the guy with 5 invested, had 5, the guy with 2 put him to work, got 2 more. Here's the scary thing though. I think in the church, in my own life, I don't even just say in the church, I'll talk about me. In my own life, I actually applaud sometimes the people who, or whenever I, don't take action. Because again, I can justify it by saying really spiritual things like, oh, I'm waiting on the Lord. This guy, we might even applaud him because it said, no, I knew that you were serious. He's talking about the master, so let's talk about Jesus. I know that Jesus is awesome and powerful, and I know that he's really serious. So it says he was afraid, talking about fear. It says he was afraid and went and hid his one talent. That's our response, I think, a lot of times, is, okay, well, I'm going to justify my inaction by saying that it was the fear of the Lord, right? Oh, I was just afraid of him, and I didn't want to screw up. Talking about this perfection stuff. I didn't want to screw up, so I didn't try. Perfect. You can't fail if you don't try, right? And Jesus is saying, look, at least just put it in the bank. Do something with what I gave you. Do something. And again, he's so serious. I was reading this. I don't think we take him seriously enough. He's like, no, this guy, check out this worthless servant into the darkness where there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. He doesn't take apathy, complacency, passiveness lightly. It's not just like you get there, you get to the other side, and he's like, oh, wish you would have done something. Oh, shucks, you really missed out. It's not that. If we fail to invest what we have, that's not a joke to him. And my understanding of God, my understanding of Daddy, I think if we would have tried, if we were this one talent guy and just tried something and totally fell on our face, he would have compassion and he would welcome us in. It's the inaction, it's the fear holding us back that he despises. Not failure. He's not afraid of you failing, putting it out there and trying. That's just my knowledge of Daddy, how I know him to be. That he's so compassionate. He's not going to be mad at you if you try and fall flat on your face. He's upset when you don't try. And I think the reason is, and as I've been going through all this stuff, the common theme is we don't trust God. We don't trust him. If he's given us something and given us a task to do, he's the one who's put in us. So our fear is actually saying, Dad, I actually don't trust you. And I think the reason he's so harsh about this is because, can you imagine how that feels as a parent? There's lots of, I'm not a parent yet, but the parents in this room, if your kid came to you and you said, hey, I'm giving you this, and I want you to go over there and do this with it. And they're like, no. That's saying that they don't trust you. You're sending them out to do something, you've equipped them with what it takes, and they're actually saying through their inaction that they don't trust you as a parent. And I think the reason God is so harsh about this is I think it breaks his heart. I've given you these talents, I've given you this, I've placed it inside you, and I've given you dreams and goals and all these different things that I've planted inside your heart. And you not doing it actually just tells me that you don't trust me. I think that breaks his heart. Again, I just want us to be the kids that only care about our daddy's approval and actually know who he actually is. He's not some big lightning bolt casting down whatever. He's a loving Father who just wants the best for you. And Jesus, he came so that we would have life and life more abundant. He's not here to squash you or whatever. It's the abundant life that he's calling us to. And I don't even know that very many of us are living life, let alone life abundant. Huh? For real? I'm talking about myself too. I don't know how many days I'm actually living life, let alone life abundant. We're missing out, and I think it breaks God's heart when we don't step out. We all know the story of 5 loaves and 2 fish. We know David and Goliath. It's this idea of using what you have and realizing that it's not enough without Jesus. But with him, it's way more than enough. The little rock that you're chucking, David, for the 5 loaves and 2 fish, or even that 1 talent. I bet you part of this was this guy's insecurity, saying, oh, I only have 1. I only have 1, so what am I going to do with that thing? I might as well just keep it safe. I might as well play it safe. But all that is just garbage. Playing it safe is garbage. It's all garbage. And I guess that's the real message for today, is actually doing something. Take action and do something. You know, the word says, and I'll end here because I know we're running out of time, but in James 1, it talks about being a hearer or a doer of the word. It says, do not deceive yourselves and be only hearers of the word, but be doers of the word. Do what it says. Do what it says. And I think in the church, again, I'm talking about me, you hear the word, but how often do we actually do something? And I forget which, anyway, there's some saint that had a really cool quote, and he was talking about one obeyed scripture is worth memorizing the whole book. One obeyed, practiced scripture is worth memorizing the whole book. So the challenge today, and I want to just spend a few minutes as the music is going to be playing, is to meditate on what is God asking you to do, and two things: something internal that he's asking you to work on, and something external that he's asking you to do. You know, like go and ask for forgiveness from this person, or go and pay for someone's coffee at Starbucks, you know, or just go and do something. And so I'm preaching again next week, which I don't know if that's a good thing for you guys or a bad thing, but I'm excited about it, so too bad. And next week, I'm actually going to be talking a lot less, and you guys are going to be talking a lot more. And the reason is I want testimonies from what God did this week coming up. So do something so that you can have a testimony. How about that? You know, whatever God's asking you to do, whether it's internal work or external, hey, go out and, you know, pay for someone's coffee at Starbucks or pray for someone. Oh, speaking of which, Trevor and I were out at Jeff's Cafe the other day, and this guy had a hurt leg, and God's like, hey, I want you to pray for him. So I asked if I could pray for him, and he was like, no, and then he left. And that was it. But the point isn't that you succeed, whatever the heck that means. You know, the point is that you do it. It's obedience. I don't know what seed is planted in that guy's heart or whatever, you know, but my job was, God said, hey, pray for that guy's leg. Okay, cool, and you go for it. So obedience this week, that's it. So I just want to spend a few minutes and stay sitting while the music plays a little bit, and just really ask God, what are you asking of me? You know, what do you want me to do or stop doing or whatever, internal and external. Joe, go ahead.
Since I won't be here next week, so I'm just gonna share. Since Monday, I've been being prompted to sing a solo at church.
Cool.
You think it's cool, right? And I have a very bad stage fright.
Yeah.
God even gave me the song. He gave me the scripture. And I'm still, even now, my hands are very cold thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I know, like, I guess I'm going to have to get my head out of that hole.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, let's just pray for Joe right now. That's awesome. God, thank you for Joe and the obedient heart that she has. And I thank you that, confidence in you doesn't mean that we do it without fear. It just means that we do it anyway. You know. So God, would you help us be people that just do it anyway, even if we're totally trembling at the knees, God, that we obey you. And thank you for what you're going to do in her and through that song that you're ministering to your people in Jesus' name. So again, just, yeah.
Just a thought for those that don't know what to share or what to activate their lives, because we quite often we look at the others around us and go, oh, you know, they're so wonderful, look at what they're doing. Look at the next person and see all the goals that they've achieved. And sometimes that can be crushing because we think, oh, well, we can't be like them because, you know, we haven't been given that gift. But on that note, in the Bible in Romans, it talks about, in Christ we are many form one body, and each member belongs to the others, and we have different gifts according to the grace given to us. If a man's gift is prophesying, let him use it in proportion to his faith. If it's in serving, let him serve. If it's in teaching, let him teach. If it's encouraging, let him to encourage. If it's in contributing to the needs of others, let him give generously. If it's in leadership, let him govern diligently. If it's in showing mercy, let him do it cheerfully. And so We can't get caught up in, what somebody else is doing, because we're so unique. And each and every one of us sitting here has something special that we have to give back.
No, that's bang on. That's exactly it. Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think it's a coincidence that the message is about doing something with the talents God has given you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, let's just spend some time reflecting, and really, the goal is here to actually do something this weekend. I want to hear about it because I think it'll really bless the body next week. So do something. And really, coming out of our time of reflection, the most important thing you can do is share what God has told you to somebody else, so that you're accountable. Like now, I know you're writing a book. I'm going to be asking you about that. You're singing a song. I'm going to be asking you about that. Because accountability, that's how you do it. You have people in your corner. That's what the body's all about, right? You can't do it. No man or woman is an island, right? So we need to be praying for each other and be accountable. So after you get that, I encourage you in the coffee time, even and whatever is, share that with each other and pray for each other, like on the spot here. That helps too. Awesome. Okay.